Hey, Commanders fans. Well, wouldn't you know today is the 92nd birthday of the Washington football franchise? So grab your drinks, grab your snacks. We got a lot to cover tonight on our birthday. So let's get it started. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Hey, good evening, and welcome to Commanders Gridiron. I'm your host, Steve Lockman. Thank you for all for tuning in tonight on our tri-weekly episode of Commanders Gridiron, where we talk all things on the field and off the field about our beloved Washington Commanders. And as I alluded to in the little pre-blurb there before we started our show, today is actually the 92nd birthday of football in D.C. That's right. On this date in 1932, an NFL franchise formerly known as the Boston Braves took their move from Boston and were granted the team there in DC. And kind of the rest is history, right? We've been through a couple name changes and a couple everything else going on. As Paul says, absolutely happy birthday, DC. You know, one of the storied franchises that's gone through a lot, especially in the last 24 years, but even more so since their inception back in the 30s. And, you know, we're happy to have it. And what better way to kind of ring in that birthday celebration today than the announcement from the team that they're actually going to redo a part of their uniforms. And it's something that, you know, as NFL fans and team fans, especially season ticket holders alike in media, were always hounding the team for the horrendous uniform coloration, mock-ups, combinations, whatever you want to name it and call it, right? But, you know, it's announced today through the team that they're bringing back the gold pants. That's right. They're bringing back the gold pants. So even though we got to put up with some hideous jerseys here and there, one of the things that they're looking to do, at least for a couple games this season with the burgundy jerseys, is bring back the gold pants that we so desperately remember from the 80s and 90s of our Super Bowl era. And it'll be a welcome to have them coming back and have our guys looking sharp. As always, you'll see our topics scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. You can see where we're at in the list and see what you've missed and what's coming up. Feel free to comment on what other platform you're watching us on. Love to have engagement, love to have the comments, love to have the questions. You know, whatever we're talking about, feel free to chime in and, you know, let's have that discussion about our beloved NFL football franchise. And of course, you know, as some of our topics are going to talk about tonight, we're going to be talking about some other NFL players as well, as we go through some of the cap hits and position rankings. And of course, obviously the Brandon Ayuk drama that's unfolding here on the NFL level as well. So without further ado, let's get jumping in. One of the first topics, as we kind of always start off the show with some off the field stuff, is, you know, basically personnel moves. And it seems like every episode there's personnel moves with our franchise. And since, you know, Josh Harrison Company took over last summer with the removal of the former owner, removal of the former coaching staff, GMs, the whole 9 yards, there's been a big turnover. And of course, you know, going into this week's episode, it's kind of no shortage of that, right? So the Washington Commanders announced about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that they made a lot of hires and promotions within the football personnel and scouting department. All good moves, all good promotions for the guys that were still remaining from the Rivera era. There wasn't a whole lot. Adam Peters and company brought on a lot of guys. Dan Quinn brought a lot of guys on. But of course, as we know, you know, whether you're a beloved Washington Redskins fan or, you know, new to the Commanders bandwagon, one name that jumped out at the top of the list was Doug Williams, former Super Bowl winning quarterback, right? And Doug Williams kind of was the liaison player personnel position the last couple seasons. And Adam Peters and Josh Harris promoted him to basically like a senior advisor to the general manager. Not really sure what the job duties of that are, but as we go into this new era under new ownership and a new ownership group, of Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, Mitchell Rales, etc. You're starting to see a lot of former alumni and players come back out, kind of come back out of the woodwork, coming out of the bushes, like in the great Homer Simpson meme. It's kind of be a part of the franchise that they once played for and they once loved. You didn't see that with the former owner Dan Snyder just because of the way things got. But it's a great welcome, right? And you're starting to see a lot of the guys that are even on the overlay you see on the screen here: Darrell Green, Doug Williams, Riggins, Clark, the posse, Art Monk, starting to come back, do some appearances and some team interaction. As Paul jumps in and goes, wait, there's a bandwagon Commanders fan out there, right? Well, if you follow our social media, about a week and a half ago, we posted the official Washington Commanders bandwagon application form, with the hype around our number 2 overall pick, Jayden Daniels, in this year's NFL draft, and what appears to be somewhat of an upswing on our team this year. Go ahead, fill out the fan application form, jump on the bandwagon. We'd love to have you. Even if you happen to be a fellow NFC East football fan, we won't criticize you too much, right? That's kind of the way it is. Back to the personnel moves, there wasn't a whole lot else that's shocking, so to speak. It's just a list of people and what their positions are, and whether they're analysts, whether in communications, whether in scouting, blah 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 blah. The one that did kind of spark some interest amongst the media and diehard fans and podcasters alike, such as myself, was actually the removal of Eugene Shen. Eugene Shen was a very touted and highly educated individual that came to Washington about 8 months ago. And, some people may recognize the name Eugene Shen from former NFL circles, big analyst guy, that helps, use the analytics of on the field, off the field to make decisions between GM, head coach, ownership, that kind of deal, right? So, now that the Commanders actually hired Brandon Sosna as the senior vice president of football ops, he's actually going to lead the analytics with Adam Peters now as GM. There's speculation that Shen will actually join Harris's group, the Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment Group, in some other capacity. So he's not 100% leaving the fold, so to speak. He's just kind of leaving the NFL part of it. After successfully supporting the transition to the new ownership last season, Eugene Shen will be transitioning out of the Commanders organization, but he's actually in discussions to the Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment Group and their initiatives, right? People that were kind of missing the boat and overly concerned about this, right, for a lot of reasons. Under the old ownership group of Dan Snyder, when you saw somebody come in, and a lot of the business side of people over the last 5-6 years kind of come to mind first, if you saw them stay for less than 2 years, you kind of knew something was up, something was going on. Why did they leave? Were things that bad? That kind of deal. But we got to look at why Shen was brought in, and Shen was brought in to help Harris see where the Commanders were, kind of like that present day evaluation, because Harris didn't know what he didn't know, right? New owner coming in, didn't know the ins and outs of football, never owned a football franchise before, and needed to evaluate what's currently going on, not only from an X's and O standpoint, but also from a business side of things under the old GM, under President Jason Wright and company, to see where things can improve, what should we keep, what can we expound on, blah 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 blah. So but then when Harris hired Peters as the GM and Sosna to build out the organization, Shen helped get to a point, basically from point A of last year's team into the new regime to point B. So, it's basically kind of, he saw the writing on the wall, so to speak, that his role was going to get diminished and, not be as effective as what he once hired to be. But as I said, look, Shen's a great individual, graduate of Harvard, earned an MBA from MIT. So super smart dude. A couple of days later, after he was hired, whether or not his deciphering and evaluation of the analytics played a part into it, keep in mind that Montez Sweat and Chase Young were literally traded like within 2 weeks of his hire, and actually starting. So, kind of take that little nugget for what it's worth, right? But, as Shen was announced to be our analytics overseer, they kind of just diminished with the roles that Harris brought in between bringing on Lance Newmark from the Detroit Lions as his new assistant GM, and then Sosna, as I said, from Detroit, who basically is going to lead the analytics department, now vacated by Shen. So it's all good stuff. I think Shen's going to, keep doing what he's doing with Harris at some point, somewhere. And, the Commanders are in a better spot because of what he did in a short 8 months here. So the next thing that kind of caught my eye, is, we scroll through the couple weeks while we're off, looking for topics and what comes across the wire on social media, whether it's, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, was actually from Pro Football Talk. .com. They did their power rankings for 2024, and it's kind of like their pre-camp edition, right? So obviously it lists all 32. We know the top, the top 5, top 10. We'll run them down real quick, but we kind of know them all, and let's be honest, in kind of the power order that we know. Chiefs number 1, 2 49ers, 3 Lions, 4 Ravens, 5 Eagles, 6 Packers. So let's kind of look at a more detailed of where we are, right? So we know that the Eagles, NFC East, number 5. And this is, pre-camp, preseason, what we got on paper, teams, players, who we drafted, et cetera, free agents, stuff like that, right? So obviously, like I said, we got the Eagles sitting at number 5. Then coming in next in the NFC East is the Cowboys at 16, good, bad, or indifferent. Then we kind of look at the bottom of the order, which is kind of where we expect ourselves to be somewhat. But they have the Giants ranked at 28, Commanders ranked at 29, only to be followed by the Cardinals at 30, Patriots at 31, Panthers at 32. So when you're looking at something like that, you kind of got to wonder, and there's no real context to how they rank them, the data they're looking at, the points that we're using through Pro Football Talk. But you got to wonder why you're 4th from the bottom, right? Now, obviously, we didn't have the best season last year. We only had 4 wins, which resulted in us being the number 2 overall draft pick. I get that. But, looking at the teams that we had won, against, or we played super tight against that we should have won, we took teams to overtime, et cetera, et cetera. The draft that we had that was really well, in most areas by football analysts and TV and media personalities, we did at least like around a solid B for our draft. Some of the free agent signings that we have, the change in ownership. I kind of expected us to be a little bit higher into the mid 20s. But like I said, I'm not overly surprised that, we are 4th from the bottom, right? There's a reason why you picked number 2 overall in this year's draft. So as Paul chimes in, them 215 boys did our offense, NFC East first team rankings. I didn't have one commander in the offense. McLaurin I had 3rd behind Lamb and Brown overall. I had DC at 18 overall in the NFL. Yeah. So like I said, I would agree with that, right? I mean, I'm looking at kind of some of the people that we either played really hard, they made some offseason additions just as much as we did. And, so it kind of sucks to say this, but like when you look at 18 to 32, basically the bottom half, like you could literally put them all at 18 and just like tie them, right? I mean, in no particular order, let's be honest. 18, they had the Colts, and this is the order they ranked them: the Colts, the Falcons, the Jaguars, the Seahawks, the Broncos. The Vikings was kind of surprised that they dropped, maybe because of lost Kirk Cousins. Saints, Jets, but Jets, are getting Rodgers back, good or bad. Raiders, Titans, and then Giants, Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots, and Panthers. So like I said, you can kind of be like golf, right? Where like you tie for 18th and then everybody shares 18 to 32. But, so it'll be interesting. We don't have the easiest of schedules, even though we are ranked at like the number 8 or 9th easiest schedule, which I kind of find interesting because we play the AFC North this year, as well as, playing the NFC East twice between home and away. So, 2/3 of your season is pretty difficult, but somehow we ended up with the 8th or 9th easiest NFL schedule. But it's just something, like I said, just kind of perked your interest as you're scrolling through, on the daily to kind of get some content that, hey, look, what others think of you. Obviously, we know that the level of respect amongst the NFL media, insiders, whatever you call it, for the Commanders is obviously very low all the time, 100%. But it's our job to start winning games, start kind of proving them differently. Let our coaching staff help us out and get our players ready on Sundays to make that difference so we can get higher on the list. But kind of as you look at one of the things from those power rankings, or what you take from the preseason power rankings, as we kind of dub it, right? Because nothing's really happened. Is the rankings about teams and culture and destination, like how desirable is it a destination for a free agent, for a rookie, for a coach, for an admin person to go to a team, right? And an article came out from USA Today. It said the Commanders are no longer one of the NFL's least desirable destinations. So when you look at 32 teams, right, even if we are now not in the bottom 5, like, I'll take that as a victory. We all know the struggles and the shitty situations, no pun intended, physically, literally, figuratively, over the last 20 years under former owner Dan Snyder, and why we were always at the bottom, whether it was facilities, from stadium to training facility, practice facilities, to fan experience, to players and free agents, whatever you want to list it. It was bad. But there's promise since we've got our new ownership group, we got our new GM, we got a new head coach and coaching staffs, we got a really exciting number 2 quarterback with our overall pick. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, right? So, as a brief synopsis for those of you that care to join me back in memory land, we look at the fact that when Bruce Allen came aboard at the end of 2009, the next 14 years of Snyder's tenure, Snyder was cheap. Snyder was left to sign value free agents with very few options, right? Once Snyder quit overpaying for all of our free agents, I mean, and the list, I know I won't cover the entire list, but let's just reminisce for a minute, right? We had the likes of Bruce Smith, Jason Taylor, Deion Sanders, Mark Carrier, Mark Brunell. I mean, I could probably Albert Haynesworth, first $100 million contract signed in the NFL. Just failed big free agent splash after free agent splash. Adam Archuleta, a lot of guys on defense, not so much on offense. But we were swinging big, and guys would only stick around for a year or two, 3 at the most. Always, majority of them out of their prime, on the backside of their career, so that when you look at their football card, it literally lists their first 2 teams predominantly of their career, and at the very bottom it was Washington, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, to finish out their career, or they'd go somewhere else for another year and finish it out. But things were bad, right? But it's definitely looked like it's getting bigger. So fans are excited again. Why are fans excited? One reason is Adam Peters. The Commanders would never have landed someone with his qualifications and options if Snyder was still here. Let's be honest, right? And Peters has filled his front office with an amazing group of the brightest minds around the NFL. And that started with his hiring of Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn actually was able to land such a awesome, unique, diverse coaching staff as well. So that definitely helps him out as well. And times have changed, right? More proof of the times. We're no longer atop of the list, naming us as one of the least desirable NFL franchises. So, as Paul says, I used to say it was your obituary when you signed with the Commanders under Snyder. And you're absolutely right. Like, you can't argue with that, right, my friend? Man, you either one of 2 things. You either A, killing your career and riding off into the sunset wearing a Washington Redskins jersey, or B, you're up for making that one last cash grab that you knew Snyder was going to pay out for you, even though you didn't deserve it, right? And like I said, the list goes on. The list is long and distinguished, as they say, right? But here's the list, according to USA Today, of the least 5 desirables. The NFL trade destinations ahead of training camp, and surprise, Washington is not on this list, right? So in no particular order, it's kind of interesting that there is an NFC East team on the list, but Washington is not one of them. Okay, so in no particular order, the New York Jets, the New England Patriots, the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, and our beloved New York Giants of the NFC East. So it kind of makes you wonder real quick, right? Like, why are these teams on there? So you look at the Jets, and even though the Jets kind of have like this crazy-esque owner, I think the only I think the only two owners that come to mind real quick off the top of my head that are crazier than Woody Johnson out of the New York Jets is Tepper out of Carolina and Jerry Jones out of Dallas, right? But Johnson is always in the news for something. Can't seem to get on the same page with his GM and his head coach, especially about their star quarterback. Why he's not a mandatory mini camps. Why he's off in a hut somewhere in darkness for 60 days or whatever it is. And kind of stuff like that. But they have a really good roster, offensively, defensively. Look, I mean, their stadium's only like 2 or 3 years old. I don't know what their practice facilities are like, but the Jets are on the list of least desirable franchises to go to. Okay, New England Patriots. The dynasty is over, right? Let's be honest. And I think that's kind of why they made the list. Bill Belichick's gone, Brady's gone. As they joked about on the Tom Brady roast, the law firm of Gronkowski, Edelman, and Welker is gone too. So all the names and stalwarts of long tenure are gone. Mayo comes in as a new coach. They have a new GM, with Kraft's son. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out there. Facilities are still really good up there. So other than the culture change and, them not being overly successful the last couple of years, I think that's why they're on there. Denver Broncos, man, what a barnstorm, right? Between, the whole Russell Wilson saga last year, going into camp this year with, your choice of starting quarterbacks between Zach Wilson, Bo Nix, and another dude. They all look alike, really. You put them up in a mugshot line, and they all look like triplets. But hopefully they can turn things around out there. They got a decent defense. Offense is going to be questioned. New ownership group wants to spend money. I mean, hell, they're paying Russell Wilson, how many $1 million to go play in Pittsburgh just because they didn't want him in Denver. Number two, and I don't know, like I said, if this is in the order of least desirables, but I would put number two at number one, and that's Carolina Panthers. Look, when you bring in a coaching staff that was pretty good under Frank Wright in Indianapolis, and you literally can him 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the season, and your owner is probably Dan Snyder 2.0 or worse, you deserve to be at the top of the least desirable places to go, right? And how the Carolina Panthers and Tepper swindled the Charlotte voters into authorizing like 600 million or 400 million or whatever it was in taxpayer dollars for stadium upgrades, I'll never figure out. And I don't think anybody in NFL circles will, but more power to you, right? The last one, it kind of surprises me a bit. Is the New York Giants. So we kind of know that, hey, look, New York doesn't really know what they're doing at quarterback, what they think they want to do at quarterback. They kind of didn't really have an identity. They lost Saquon Barkley. They had some good dudes in the draft. They picked up Brian Burns in free agency. So, they drafted Neighbors as their first round draft pick, solid stud at wide receiver. Share the stadium, which is fairly new, MetLife, and with the New York Jets. And, Daboll, I think this is going to be one of the years that, he's got a lot of pressure on him to perform as head coach. Wouldn't be surprised that, if they put another losing season together, that come, Black Monday in January, he gets the pink slip, right? As Paul chimes in, Carolina proved to me that they wanted to sell it all. Started with CMC trade, yep, and still now this year with Burns to the Giants. They don't care. Absolutely. And I think, it goes back to so many people in NFL circles talk about these high profile college quarterbacks coming out and, them being busts or, whatever. And I think the overwhelming majority of it isn't that they are a bust. It's that they are put in the shittiest of situations and cultures in NFL than you can shake a stick at, right? Like how many great college quarterbacks got drafted by the Browns, the Panthers, you name the number one, number two overall draft picks, and including Washington, and literally had their career killed because the coaches couldn't utilize them right, couldn't, they couldn't build around, the organizations couldn't build around them correctly. They went through coaching and coordinator carousels, like the whole 9 yards, right? So you're basically setting them up for failure. So I see that with Carolina even more than I see with the Giants. What kind of jumps out at me on this list before we jump to our next topic is the fact that both New York City teams, well, New Jersey, technically, the ones that share a stadium together, are on this list, right? I didn't really even think about that until like probably 5 minutes ago when I was perusing all the stuff that I'm going to go over tonight, and I was like, "Holy cow!" Like the Giants and the Jets are both on this list. So, is it the market? Is it the coaching staffs? Is it the pressure versus performance outcomes? Is it, it's not really stadium and facilities. So, kind of what makes New York like that least desirable, spot to go, right? So it'll definitely be interesting to see, how these franchises do this coming season. Um, and let's see what happens, right? So, um, New York fan base is hard to play for. Absolutely. When you go to the bigger market teams, New York, Chicago, LA, Atlanta, kind of come to mind right off the top of my head. Um, those are the ones that obviously with the bigger markets, more exposure, then they have the higher expectations. You look at, especially New York in every sport, baseball, football, basketball, like the expectation to win and, make the playoffs on an annual basis is so high compared to so many other markets and so many other teams that it's almost worth not playing in those big market teams. The downside to that is like in a lot of other sports, then you aren't going to make the money. Baseball, I mean, basketball doesn't really have a salary cap, kind of like baseball, so you can go get your money bag without too much penalty, kind of like football, So football, you're under the salary cap. You're kind of restricted by the NFLPA contract and bargaining agreement for what you can get paid. No max structured deals and contracts like basketball, so to speak. But right, it's so hard to play in New York. You're either loved or you're trashed in New York. So Paul chimes in. Carolina, they banked on Bryce Young. Look at CJ Stroud with Texas. They have weapons and a legit coach. Panthers got neither. Absolutely, right? And, a lot of credit goes to CJ Stroud for the way he performed during his rookie year. But you're absolutely right. You have one franchise that literally embraced the rookie with the new head coach in DeMeco Ryans. And then you have basically the 180-degree opposite in Carolina, where you're doing a coaching carousel, a coordinator carousel. You're trading your best guys in a barnstorm, fire sale, and you're not really getting much back in picks to show for it, the whole 9 yards. So absolutely. But with the culture change that we have here in DC, it's great to not make lists. It's great to be in a better place. And that was kind of evident with the OTAs that we just had. And we see that with the mini camp that just recently ended up, we had a couple players that we kind of like to say, hey, their stock plummeted after the OTAs here this past couple weeks, right? As Diggs BTW1, by the way, one. Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for tuning in. Love to have you join us. I won't hold it against you that you're a Cowboys fan. One of my producers is a diehard Cowboys fan and co-host of them 215 Boys here every week on Wednesday nights. So we have a lot of good bantering going back and forth. You'll hear a lot of trash talking between me and my other NFC East counterparts. So, thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning. Hey, you might even get some tidbits to go back and talk about with your Dallas Cowboy fans. So you'll get a lot of insight here on my team, for your team and your opponents, just by watching or listening to the Commanders Gridirons. Thanks for joining me, bud. So we're going to look at 4 players real quick who I think their stock plummeted after OTAs. Now, let's be honest, we're not doing some serious hitting. We're not doing, full team, I want to say team drills, team scrimmages, like preseason games and, It's not 100% live. It's a lot easier in OTAs and mini camps. It's probably the easiest part of the season, right? But it's also your time where when you're not in that position to make an impression on especially the new coaching staff that just came in, your new position coaches, out of all the coaches and coaching staffs and position coaches and coordinators, we only had 3 come back from last year. Okay. So everybody's brand new. They don't know what you're doing. They only saw you on film if you had the opportunity to play in the games last year. And, you know, it's your chance. Basically, it's your time to shine, right? And it's your time to shine, especially with no pads on. So, but there were a couple guys that kind of jumped out that said, hey, look, I don't know if they had the greatest of mini camps. Don't know why. Wasn't overly hot. We're only in DC. It's not like we're down in Texas or out in the Arizona desert. But it kind of is what it is, right? But it's been incredibly positive to see everything that happened in OTAs and the mini camps. We saw our rookie class come in, led by JD5, Samerstill, the cornerback, McCaffrey, a wide receiver, Sinnett, who, I'll throw in a little nugget here in a bit as well. And, those guys all look good, look sharp, putting in some time, coming in early, leaving late, the whole 9 yards. I really feel McCaffrey cracks the starters at wide receiver 3 over Brown, Crowder, and Zacchaeus. Yep. All things I'm reading, all things I'm seeing, I think McCaffrey has a legitimate shot at number 3. I think his steepest competition is going to be Brown, only because Brown has the NFL experience, right? But, when you're going into a new offensive system, is there really such thing as experience? You both got to learn a new playbook. You both got to learn a new offensive coordinator. You both have to learn a brand new quarterback. So you're both kind of starting on like an even playing field, even though one dude's been in the NFL for 3 years, 4 years, right? Crowder's basically going to be more of a return guy, slot guy, maybe third down type. So, he'll definitely make the team. I'm not sure if Crowder's going to get elevated up to the level of wide receiver 3, but I could definitely see McCaffrey doing that. Sinnett, who we actually drafted in the second round behind Mike Samerstill out of Michigan, as our cornerback. Actually, funny little tidbit here. And you get a lot of little tidbits on Commander's Gridiron. I'm going to pick Sinnett's brain. I actually have the opportunity to do an autograph signing with him this coming Saturday. So I'm going to welcome him officially from a fan perspective to DC. And, just kind of pick his brain, see how minicamp went. I know a lot of guys somewhat, you kind of got to feel them out when you're doing these events, how much they actually want to talk about football, how much they want to talk about life, that kind of deal. But, the guy came from Kansas State University, out in the Midwest. So, he comes with a lot of potential, comes with definitely a good upceiling. I think if he can stay healthy and learn the system under Kingsbury, Sinnett literally has the potential to be a Jordan Reed, Logan Thomas 2.0, if not better than those two guys. So, by the time we get to our next episode here, Commander's Gridiron, I'll have a little chat with, the way we can see, how Sinnett's fitting into the offense, how he's feeling, what he thinks about the upcoming season, what he thinks about JD5. So, we'll go with that. As Paul says, Steve, with the new NFL kickoff rules, USFL rules, Z defense doesn't move till the ball is caught. Who's your kick returner? You want fast, shifty players. Dallas will strive with Turpin and Vaughn. So it's funny you bring that up. We kind of talked about it briefly, but not in depth on our last episode, that Quinn was noted. It's kind of interesting because it made the rounds on social media, video clips through our team insiders and stuff. They're like, holy cow, like this player is catching punts and this player is taking kickoffs, right? And somebody actually asked Quinn at a press conference, like, why is, you name the player, right? Like Jahan Dotson, catching kickoffs. Why is, Emmanuel Ford catching punts? Why is, so-and-so doing this? And Quinn's response was basically that, we don't know what we don't know in our players, right? So like you could, because of the NFL kickoff and punt return changes, you literally now have the opportunity to take some of your fastest and speediest position players that would never play return before in their life or in their career and probably have a positive impact for your team on the field, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean like that, your wide receivers basically the guys that are on your hands team for onside kicks are now have the full potential of being your kick return, punt return guys in the NFL. Um, it kind of sounds funny to say that, but like, don't be surprised if you see, a wide receiver from the Commanders back returning. Don't be surprised if you see a secondary guy back returning punts. Crowder's going to get the nod just because he's good. He has experience doing it. He's small, he's speedy. But I would definitely, be, hey, look, there's going to be some guys that are going to get a shot from Quinn and the special teams coordinator from Seattle. Lizzo, I forget his name, something like that. That, these guys are going to do it, right? I'm thinking with his speed, Dax Milne is lightning fast. So here's the funny thing, right? I don't see Dax Milne making the team. The problem is, you're right. He's fast. He did well for us return of punts last year. He didn't fumble. Like, he did his job. He caught the ball. That's the first part, right? That's the hardest part, is catching the ball. If he saw the opportunity to take a return, he'd take a return 5, 10, 15 yards, whatever, get a little positive outcome. But aside from that, there's not a spot for him on this team. If McCaffrey's coming in from the draft, we got Crowder, and Brown, and then you throw in, McLaurin and Dotson, well, like, you're already up to 5, 6 receivers. We may take 7. Under Rivera, there were years we took 7, sometimes we took 6, that kind of deal. So maybe he squeaks in purely on special teams, but like, I don't even know if I see it, right? Side note about Dax Milne, let's give you the tea on him. So I just read today that he got engaged to Zach Wilson's ex, right? So we're going to tie this all together. It's called Days of Our Lives on the football side, right? If you guys remember, Zach Wilson's ex was the one that came out and accused Zach Wilson of sleeping with his best friend's mom, or her best friend's mom, or something like that, right? So drama. But it's funny because Zach Wilson just got engaged to his girlfriend, now fiance, whatever, like within the last week or two. And there was a side-by-side shot of Zach Wilson and his fiance, and Dax Milne and Zach Wilson's ex-girlfriend, who just got engaged. So it's kind of funny, right? We tie it all together. We love drama here. But Kingsbury loves wide receivers, might be a deep wide receiver room. Yep, he might. But man, like I said, I think you're just gonna have to see where people fit into his system, where Kingsbury can maximize them on the field. As we know, there's only one football and a lot of hungry hands. Whether that's receivers, whether that's JD5 running it, whether that's the backfield that we got now, that we're going to talk about here coming up in the show as well. So, who knows? As we get into training camp, we're going to take a look at that depth chart hard. Moving forward, and we'll see. But one guy that I think is going to end up being on the short stick, and his OTAs definitely didn't help him out, was Mitchell Tinsley, who was Commander's wide receiver, right? He was a Cinderella story from last summer, as Bill Murray, from Caddyshack would say, a Cinderella story. He was an undrafted free agent, rose, basically from, no name to rightfully earning a place on the 53-man roster coming out of training camp last season, going into the season. Unfortunately for him, Ron Rivera didn't trust him enough to get him into the rotation. So it's kind of like, I made the 53-man roster between Rivera and the offensive coordinator, EB. They just didn't plug him into the passing rotation much at all. So he was barely active on game days, didn't have much quantity, didn't have much exposure. So, like I said, with Peters drafting McCaffrey and Zacchaeus, who both basically were impressive in OTAs as well, I think Tinsley is going to be the odd man out. One thing, and he had a bad OTA, but I'm not sure how this is going to pan out for his roster outlook, only because we need offensive linemen. Ricky Stromberg, didn't really have a great OTA, right? He became, well, let's be honest, the offensive line was the weak link in Ron Rivera's final games and roll of the dice, that didn't pay off for them, right? We know that it was absolutely downright crappy last year, and one of the reasons it got us the number 2 overall pick in the draft. But it's interesting that Peters brings in Tyler Biadasz, center, Nick Allegretti, who both are going to be in week 1 lineup. So it's interesting that, they selected in the 3rd round Brandon Coleman for offensive lineman. He's definitely going to get a shot here going into training camp and see how he fares in the preseason games. So Stromberg really needs to have a really good training camp to make the team. I think he may even make the team as like depth, but I don't know if he's 100% going to start, right? So what are you hearing about Javonte Jean-Baptiste? He was one of my favorites at Notre Dame, Hug Motor. So he's actually been making some waves on a good level in DC. Some of the insiders, some of the team insiders, have been watching him intently, kind of taking note. It's kind of one of those guys that, soft-spoken, action on the field type guys, so he's not loud. He doesn't make a lot of noise. I mean, then again, most offensive linemen don't. But he kind of lets his work speak for itself. So I think he's going to make the team. Short of them going out and signing like 1 or 2 average to above average offensive linemen, it'll be interesting to see where he falls into the whole mix for the 53-man roster. But I think at this point, unless something really changes, that like he's going to make it. One of the guys that, definitely needs to step up their game, who's been a part of our team here the last couple of years, is Percy Butler at safety. Look, the Commanders and Adam Peters opted to not give a contract extension to Cam Curl, let him go to sign with the Los Angeles Rams in the same capacity. So, it kind of looked like it was going to be his, so to speak. But then we got Jeremy Chin. We drafted Sandra Still from Michigan. We also spent a day 3 selection on Dominique Hampton, who could play in that role. Jeremy Reeves, who's a great special teamer, kind of a backup secondary guy, as well as Derek Forrest was re-signed. Under this coaching staff with Joe Witt and Dan Quinn, like all those guys are going to flourish, right? So it'll kind of be interesting to see where Butler fits into the mix, and kind of go from there. Last but not least, defensive lineman Obata. And Obata didn't do bad last year, but he had a serious leg injury in 2023. So it kind of set him back a little bit last year, somewhat, right, when you're only playing so many games. But he's a versatile defensive lineman, which is a huge fan of Dan Quinn, right? Dan Quinn loves that when you're a versatile lineman. We're getting Mathis back, who had a couple injuries, but somewhat a productive season, really good rookie season 2 years ago, as well. So, throw in Allen, throw in Payne, throw in, Armstrong and some of the guys. They were tinkering around with moving Jamin Davis up to the edge, a little more outside linebacker, edge-ish type. So, but we can always have a good rotation of offensive or defensive line guys. Never hurts to have too much beef in the defensive trenches, right? So, the last topic before we jump into our sponsors, and it's kind of interesting if you follow our social media, follow the ESPN, Fox Sports, Bleacher Report, whatever you want to do. There's the Brandon Aiyuk drama, right? Let's just call it that. Like, let's call it as it is, because we do that here on the show, is a drama. So we're going to give you the short version of where we are now, right? So Brandon Aiyuk is a top league receiver in the NFL. Has one more year on his current contract with the San Francisco 49ers. You make the tie, read between the lines. Adam Peters was at San Fran, which is kind of one of the many connections we're going to make here. Why, they're tied to why this drama is tied to our team, right? Any other team, whatever. It wouldn't be an issue. So Aiyuk is trying to get a contract extension. Aiyuk feels that he should be paid in the neighborhood of $27 to $30 million a season, basically being one of the top receivers in the NFL. However, contract negotiations aren't exactly going very well between him and the 49ers, even to a point where like they were non-existent for a while. Then they started, they had one meeting, didn't really feel productive. Ayuk comes out on social media, says, hey, they don't want me. And oh, by the way, the whole time, and where the tie really comes into DC, he's been hanging out, talking to social media videos, practice footage, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's a whole gamut, right? With Jaden Daniels. Now, the catch to him and Jaden Daniels was him and Jaden Daniels played together at ASU. So one of the things that, you know, kind of gained momentum between fans and media here in DC was a push for Adam Peters to, you know, hey, inquire with San Fran. Let's see what San Fran might want for trade in Ayuk. And apparently it already came out between Peters, not to say that it wouldn't happen again, because we know how NFL circles work, that, you know, even though a trade doesn't necessarily come to fruition at this point in time of the year, that, you know, 2 months from now, it doesn't work out, you know, and come together, signed and sealed, we make the trade later on. It's happened before, right? Or is it dead in the water completely? So we don't know, right? So basically, you know, whether you follow the post, you know, I don't have Instagram, so I'm not following Ayuk. But, you know, if you watch what's shared, you know, basically he came out and said, hey, look, if the 49ers don't pay Brandon Ayuk, he said he'd love to play in Washington. You know, he also said that, you know, hey, look, if I can't get the contract worked out, you know, maybe Washington can trade for me. Shit, there's a quarterback, JD5 right there. I'm thinking on what I can do with him. Well, actually a direct quote on one of his social media posts. You know, so basically people were, you know, kind of hitting him up, you know, hey, what's happening? What's this? What's that? As Paul says, wow, Daniels with McLaurin, McCaffrey, and Ayuk and Robinson and Eckler as weapons. That would be pretty nice at a huge price. It would be kind of a big price, right? And I don't want to say a big price because only 2 out of those 5 would carry big cap hits. So Eckler's only on a 2-year deal. Robinson's still on his rookie contract. Running backs aren't getting paid the greatest, right? I mean, you saw what Barkley and Swift and some of those other cats that have kind of moved around here in the last couple of years have been getting. You know, whether it's franchise tags or you know, or free agent deals or whatever, you know, 8 to 10 million is kind of the norm. If you get above 10, it's kind of like an outlier, right? And we're going to talk about cap hits later on, especially with Terry McLaurin. So, you know, Henry, yep, Derrick Henry, you know, and the like. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. But, you know, Dotson's still on his rookie contract. Depending on how he does, you know, he might be in. And let's be honest, though, Dotson and McLaurin's are right now wide receiver 1, but in some cases he could be a wide receiver number 1 for like bottom third teams. But if he were, you know, to get traded or try and go somewhere else after next season, then like he'd basically be somebody else's number 2, right? You know, I think that's kind of the way that people got to look at it, especially fans. You know, they're like, oh, like, you know, if the team trades them, like we need ones for all these guys. I'm like, well, you're probably not going to get number 1s. You might get lucky and get a number 1, especially if you're, you know, a bottom 8 team that's like really looking for that, you know, wide receiver to come in. But, you know, let's be honest, like McLaurin is, I think he's going to be 29 or 30, 29 this year, 28, something like that. You know, the dude's already been in the league for 5-6 years. You know, so he's 28, 29, might be turning 30 this season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, you know, with the Ayuk story, though, you know, look, he's entering the last season of his rookie deal, told TMZ, you know, they haven't reached an agreement, but, you know, for sure, he'd love to be playing with the 49ers. So he goes back and forth all the time. Probably each day when he changes his underwear, he changes his answer on social media about who he wants to play for, how much money he's going to take, where he wants to be, blah, 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 blah. But he did say, you know, hey, look, if I don't wear a 49ers uniform, then it would be a Washington Commanders uniform, or maybe even a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. You know, so it's like I said, you know, this dude comes out with something different every day. And it's something, you know, we just keep our eyes on here because it's like, you know, hey, look, we got some of the cap space to make it work if we do. The problem is, do we give up the trade bait for him, for this season? Does Adam Peters let this season play out and then try to bring Ayuk in later on? Social media should be tampering for players. Oh man, it could be, and it probably should be, right? The video the screenshot that he put up yesterday was practice footage of JD5. For whatever reason, I didn't even see why. So now sports media and alumni and blah 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 are coming out against JD5 here in DC, saying, hey, look, like I kind of understand what you're doing, but you're not doing it the right way. So just more drama, more tea to watch what's going on, and see what happens, right? So, but we'll keep you posted here on Commanders Gridiron about Brandon Ayuk. Of course, he might just sign that big contract extension with San Fran because they'd love to throw money around. But we'll see what happens, right? Real quick, we're going to talk about one of our sponsors here at Out of the Box Sports, which is Jason Fine, attorney Big Al. You can contact him at 1-800-HURT-123. Jason specializes in motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, workers' compensation, personal injury claims. Has 3 convenient office locations throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey, with one located in Philly, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the Steel City. For all of your legal needs and legal consultations, reach out to Jason Fine, a.k.a. Attorney Big Al, at 1-800-HURT-123. Remember, if you don't win, he doesn't collect. He's there to help us out, helps everybody with all their legal needs. Give him a shout, give him a call, see if he can help you as well with whatever you need at Jason Fine, a.k.a. Attorney Big Al, at 1-800-HURT-123. All right, the last couple of topics before we close out tonight. The big one that kind of made the news and kind of got me thinking, we're going to talk about it super quick. For those of you that follow or maybe were subscribers for so many years, about the antitrust lawsuit that was brought against the league for the Sunday NFL ticket. So apparently it came out in the courts that the NFL is now basically the verdict went against the NFL, right? To the tune of like $4.7 billion for their practices of the Sunday NFL ticket. So the short version is they basically created this monopoly of the Sunday NFL ticket, charged an absorbent amount of money, and basically in lieu of people buying the Sunday NFL ticket, it pushed people to the lower desired games on the local market stations, NFL or CBS, ABC, NBC, blah, 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 right? Thursday Night Football, you get the picture. But the problem is, or I should say the catch to that is an antitrust lawsuit under federal jurisdiction. Jury awardments actually become tripled. So that number goes from 4.7 billion to like 12.8 or 13.1 or something like that. Like it's a lot of money. So and normally this would never be a topic on Commander's Gridiron. However, what caught my eye was an article. I don't even remember the source because normally I love to credit my sources with where I find this information. But basically it says that, hey, look, the NFL is basically an over umbrella of 32 independently operated franchises, which is 100% correct. So the 32 franchises within the league each operate as their own business within the association, that of which is the NFL, making them liable for bringing in profits to the NFL, which includes our beloved Washington Commanders. So recently, as I just alluded to, the NFL lost that antitrust lawsuit against customers who bought the NFL Sunday ticket from DirecTV from 2011 to 2022. Yes, 11 long years. The problem comes from overpricing due to a lack of competition, as the Sunday ticket is the primary way for fans to get access to the league's games on television. So, and basically, the jury awarded customers $4.7 billion in damages, with businesses, basically bars and restaurants, being awarded nearly $100 million in damages. That number triples under the federal antitrust laws. So they could get pricey for NFL owners. So basically, what does that mean? That, wow, let's talk about it, right? So the suit could is a key word. Now, I don't know if that's judgment is something that's covered under like NFL insurance, or, like they probably have some way of covering it all. However, if it comes down to it, which it very well could, the NFL entity could turn around to all 32 NFL teams and be like, hey, you got to pay up a share of this $14.39 billion judgment, right? Which, in essence, it basically, as I just said, it's 32 NFL owners that make up the NFL. So let's take that big number and divide it by 32. What does that come out to? $450 million a team in damages, which could be a steep price for the Commanders' owner, Josh Harris, who recently acquired the team. Now, let's be honest, Josh Harris is worth a little south of $9 billion. So is 450 really that much money? Probably not. Throw in, Magic Johnson, Mark Ein, Mitchell Rails. They all pony up like 50 million or whatever, and it's probably not that big of a hit. But when you look at teams that, are sole family or owner operated, the Rams, Chargers, Jets, Giants. A lot of these teams, obviously have some minority investment people, as far as percentages and stuff. But the majority, even the Steelers, are overwhelmingly owned by one individual or a family. That would be a steep price for them to pay, $450 million, right? Like, how do you do that? Like, you might even have to take a loan and pay that, or maybe the NFL pays that over, team pays that over 2 to 3, 4 seasons. But it is a scenario that could play out, when they get to the judgment disbursement legal portions of this case in the next coming weeks and months. And it's something that you're going to have to keep an eye on, right? Because, when your franchise is paying out $450 million, that's a lot of money that ain't going somewhere else. So, whether, as Paul says, damn, Jerry Jones will just buy the whole NFL network. He's just a PR and drama guy, right? And he probably still make all of his money back. But, $450 million, that's $450 million per team. It could be less. Let's say the NFL says, hey, we're gonna pay half of it, but and still, if every team has to do 225, that'd be a lot, right? That's $225 million that you're not spending on players, on coaches, on practice facilities, on your stadium, on fan experience, and you name it, right? All my friends are so pissed about games being blocked. The Eagles versus Packers blacked out in Philly week 1. Thank God I get every channel in the world. So I think, and there's been scuttlebutt on certain streaming options and theories going around the league, that one of the things you may see before the beginning of week 1 is obviously the NFL knows that they're not going to be able to keep doing what they're doing now. That's number one. So, more streaming options, I think you're going to see before week 1. I hope you're going to see before week 1. Let's cross our fingers, right? That's number one. Number two, one of the things that was talked about and suggested, and it actually makes perfect good sense, is why can't there be a package for individual teams? So, hey, look, like if I want to pay, I don't know, $100, $200 for the season to watch everything Commanders related, I should have that option, right? Home games, away games, nothing's blacked out, the whole 9 yards. So it'll be interesting, right? I hope it's not like the WWE going to Netflix live next year, and it's all in what streaming service wants to pay the money, right? So, you look at NASCAR and, you ask like, hey, what does NASCAR have to do with football? They're going to be putting races on Amazon now. Kind of like what the NFL did with Thursday Night Football. You're seeing a lot more different streaming options coming out of the NFL than what we have ever seen before, growing up or coming up, in the last decade, because, the cable options just are too expensive, or, people are going away from that unless you're in a bar or a restaurant. And even there, those guys are starting to go streaming. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens and what may transpire with this. So, but, we'll keep an eye on it, see how it affects our team, see how it affects the league. The next thing, as you see the topic scrolling around, because we want to try and hit these last 3 in short order here. Please don't mention NASCAR. Steve, Kyle Larson, DNF again this week. Oh, well, but let's be honest though. They're doing a road course in Chicago, road courses suck. They shouldn't be doing road courses. 2, and they shouldn't be doing them in Chicago. Number 3, it was raining all day. If you watch the race, so many people that should have been in the top 10, 15 were down at the bottom. Pit and fuel strategy and all that other BS. It was complete chaos and anarchy, but it is what it is. It's another week. Once they get back to the ovals, then put your money back on Kyle Larson again. So as you see the topics going across the bottom, the next topic that you see is going to be cap hits. And I found these next 2 graphics. I can't share them right now because we'll figure that out for the next episode. Trust me, I got it down, but I didn't have it down in time. But the one that I'm looking at is basically from via Spot Track, and they looked at the non-quarterback cap hits in 2024. So basically, everybody on this list is everybody who's a big cap hit for your team that's not a quarterback, because we know quarterbacks take the majority of money for every NFL franchise for the most part, unless you're under a rookie deal, right? So it's super interesting. Trust me, the next slide is quarterbacks. So we'll get to that in a second, right? Especially you and your Dak. And more than likely, Jerry's going to be dumb enough to make Dak the first $60 million quarterback. That's a whole other story. Okay, so let's hit it right here, right? Let's talk about why. So I guess they're going by teams. It looks like they're going by teams. Cap hit, the top cap hit, non-quarterback caps hit in 2024. So let's just look at some of the people that jump out. So we'll start with our beloved Commanders, Gridiron, in the Washington Commanders here, right? Terry McLaurin, $24.1 million, biggest cap hit, as the basically wide receiver number 1 for our beloved franchise, team leader, captain, the whole 9 yards. Trent Williams, San Francisco, $31.5 million. Okay. TJ Watt from the Steelers, $30.4 million. Since most of the guys from the Eagles have retired here recently, Lane Johnson is actually the top right now at $15.9 million. Quinnen Williams from the Jets, 20.4. Joey Bosa, 26. Max Crosby, 30 million. It's just kind of staggering the amount of money that some of these cats are making, right? Tyreek Hill, $31 million. Cooper Kupp from the Rams, $29 million. It's super interesting. DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys is actually the highest non-quarterback cap hit at $20.4 million. Budda Baker from the Cardinals is 19. But everybody's kind of like in that like $15 to $30 million range, right? It's kind of interesting, but the Taylor Moton from the Panthers is the top hit at $29 million. Just crazy, just some of these cats and what they're doing, right? But then, as we talk about cap hits, and now I'm gonna make Paul put his hands in his face. That we talk about the quarterbacks, right? But there's a special little twist on this quarterback slide that I'm going to talk about, and it's the starting quarterback percentage of your team's cap, right? So obviously, you look at our beloved Commanders. Jaden Daniels is going in the first year of his rookie contract, which is actually, other than signing bonus and guaranteed money, everything else is strictly regulated, spelled out in the NFL PA collective bargaining agreement, right? So it basically says like, hey, look, rookies can only be paid this much money, just from where they were drafted, blah 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 blah. But then you can bump up signing money, guaranteed money, and all that good stuff. But Jaden Daniels only accounts for 2.7% of the Washington Commanders' salary cap for the 2024 year, right? We talked about it earlier when we were talking about the Barnstorm and the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson only accounts for, that's right, 0.5% of the Steelers' salary cap, because the majority of the money is coming from the Denver Broncos. Caleb Williams, once he signs his contract, which he's, whatever about that clown, 2.8% of the team's cap hit. Jalen Hurts with his restructure is only going to be 5.3%. But, it's interesting that, we talk about kind of low percents. We're still below 10% right now, right? But when you look at a salary cap of, $200 and some million, these percentages kind of put that into perspective, how much money these guys are making, right? So 2 is at 9.1%. This stat was actually made before Trevor Lawrence signed the biggest contract and to be the highest paid NFL quarterback at the time, until a couple other guys here re-signed. But he was 5.9 before he re-signed with Jacksonville. Kirk Cousins, who basically swindled the Falcons into another crazy guaranteed contract, is 9.8%, so just shy of 10. Jared Goff's at 10. Joey B from Cincinnati's at 11. So I start getting up into the high numbers, right? Josh Allen, 12% of the Bills' salary cap. Lamar Jackson, 12.7. Patrick Mahomes, who usually likes to restructure because he's kind of friendly to help his team keep building around him, 14.5%. So take that, 14.5% of $215 million, right? Let's keep going because these last five are getting crazy. Daniel Dimes Jones from the Giants is 18.7% of his cap in New York City. Kyler Murray is 19.2% in Arizona. Matthew Stafford, 19.4%. Woo! Almost hitting that 20. Who comes in at number 2? Oh, my goodness. Our beloved Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys at 21.7% of his team's cap. And he's still looking for a bigger payday. But who is number 1? You guessed it. That's right. That fully guaranteed, what was it, 250 mil, 300 mil, something like that. Deshaun Watson accounts for 25% of his team's salary cap. So it kind of just shows you, obviously, where the money goes because these guys are the most important players on their team. But how much of a team's cap goes to these guys and kind of hinders them for what they can do with players around them. The Steelers have 2 starting quarterbacks for less than $11 million a year. Amazing. We are what? Right. You're at, 50 some million at 20, almost 22% of the cap. Just for the Cowboys, how do I want to say this? You got to look at what kind of season he might have, but Danny Dimes in New York is almost 19% of the Giants salary cap, whereas, hey, look, Jalen Hurts is only sitting at 5.3, and JD5 is only 2.7 under the rookie deal. So, lots of good stuff to kind of take out of that, talk about banner with, but it puts it in perspective how much one position can help, can hurt, or, takes that chunk out of your team's salary cap. Last 2 things, something I kind of found interesting, is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to talk about 4 position rankings, 3 on the field, 1 off. But it's kind of interesting. I think it was Pro Football Impact came up with a list. We love to talk about lists, especially in the off season, right? Because it's kind of what we do. They rank the head coaches from 1 to 32. And it's kind of interesting. We kind of know, look, hey, Big Red, he's number 1. Kyle Shanahan, he's number 2, right? McVay's 3, Harbaugh's 4. They put LaFleur at 5. Not too sure about that. They put Campbell, who I think should probably be higher than 6. They put him at 6. Now it gets interesting, right? Because some of these coaches haven't really done anything. Haven't really taken their team to the postseason, but they got high ratings and rankings for some reason. So if you're still watching, I'd love to know why you think your coach is so high, because I don't see it. But hey, let's see what happens, right? Number 7, Jim Harbaugh. Number 8, Sean Payton. Number 9, Sirianni. Number 10, Mike Tomlin, who hasn't had a losing season. 11 is McDermott. Probably should be higher than 11. 12 is Stefanski. Probably should be higher than 12. This makes me shake my head. I don't know if it's because it's unlucky number 13 or what. Mike McCarthy, Dallas Cowboys, right? I don't know. I know I'm going to get a comment out of Paul about that. I'm very high on my coach. I just pissed myself on that comment. You probably did. Zach Taylor from the Bengals at 14. McDaniels at 15 from the Dolphins. Peterson, 16, Jags. O'Connell, 17 from the Vikings. Steichen is 18. DeMeco Ryans is at 19. Should be way higher than 19, especially after what he did last year with C.J. Stroud and company and that amazing defense. Dayball's at 20 from the Giants. Not sure how he got that high. Bowles is at 21. Our beloved Dan Quinn is at 22. That's probably about right for the first time coming in. Yeah, I mean, when we look at the rest of the list here, I can see why he's 22. Salah from the Jets is 23. That's kind of being generous. Raheem Morris is at 24, first year coach in Atlanta. Well, returning first year with the Falcons. He's been a head coach before. Eberflus is at 25. Gannon's at 26 from the Cardinals. Dennis Allen, Antonio Pierce is at 28 from the Raiders. New coach McDonald in Seattle is 29. Callahan, new coach Tennessee, is 30. Dave Canales is 31. Jared Mayo brings up the rear at 32. So, you kind of look, kind of goes back to that preseason power rankings on teams. Don't put a lot of stock into it. You could probably much group a lot of the NFL head coaches from 20 to 32, tie them all at 20, and then just let them fight it out for those 12 spots. But some of them are kind of interesting. Not sure how they came up with these. Is it name only? Is it records? Is it experience? Is it schedule this year? Whatever. Just more stuff to talk about, right? Aha. So let's move on to the next group real quick. Running backs. So it's interesting. And actually, I caught. Hang on. I got to find it. They were talking about. So I didn't catch the entire list, and maybe it's why, because it was only a screenshot in like the DC market here. They're talking about the top 50 running backs, and the screenshot that I saw, and it's once again it's Pro Football Impact. Basically, it's like kind of a group along with like Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Talk, all those cats, right? They're basically all the same. They had Brian Robinson ranked at 27, Austin Eckler ranked at 30. So basically, they're ranking our 1-2 punch, our running back room, other than Christian Gonzalez and another individual. Basically, they're ranking our backfield in the top 30 of the NFL, which I think is actually kind of good, right? I can't see who's 1 to 21, but when both of your running backs are ranked in the top 30, that means that there are teams that don't have both of their running backs in the top 30. There are teams that don't even have their top one running back in the top 30. And I imagine there are probably other teams that have both of their running backs in the top 30 as well. So it's definitely a nod to the addition of Austin Eckler coming to DC and, mixing him with Brian Robinson, who I'm also going to see again on this coming Saturday with Sinet. So I'll be picking his brain, see what we're looking like going into the season with Kingsbury and company, and kind of see how those things go. One of the other stats that popped up when we were looking at running backs is most receptions by running back in the last 5 seasons. And Austin Eckler actually leads that group over Kamara, McCaffrey, Fournette, Aaron Jones, Zeke, Joe Mixon, Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Swift, right? And Eckler actually has that to about 35 receptions over the last 5 years that he leads the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, with 374 catches. So he's definitely got that versatility. So I think, it's going to lead well for Eckler and B-Rob. B-Rob, more of that bruising, pounding, yard gainer and running. And even though Eckler is going to get a bunch of touches as a rusher, he's also going to get some touches as a receiver as well. So, of course, where would we be without looking at the wide receiver rankings for the 2024 NFL season, which kind of brings up, the talk of, where Ayuk is, kind of where our guys are. Look, let's be honest, in no particular order. Not sure how they came up with this. Maybe it was a guy throwing darts at the board. Who knows? JJ, Justin Jefferson's at number 1, Tyreek Hill number 2, CeeDee Lamb number 3, Jamar Chase 4, AJ Brown from the Eagles 5. Can't argue with really any of those. You could probably mix them up a little bit, and you probably wouldn't be wrong. They're all top 5 receivers in the NFL. St. Brown from the Lions, Devontae Adams, Ayuk at number 8, Stephon Diggs, who's now with the Texans, Garrett Wilson at number 10. Not a bad top 10, right? So then you got to start wondering, well, where's our boys going to start filing in? Mike Evans, number 11. Nakua from the Rams at 12. DJ Moore at 13. Waddle at 14. Our boy Terry McLaurin at 15. I would definitely agree with that. Probably him. Like I said, even though he's our number 1, he's not probably the number 1 for top 10 wide receivers in the league. We had a little discussion the other day, group text, social media, whatever it was, maybe all the above. that I truly believe if McLaurin had a top NFL quarterback without the carousel of head coaches and coordinators, McLaurin would be a top 10 NFL receiver. McLaurin has only missed under 1,000-yard receiving once in his career, and of the times that he has hit it, it's been over 11 to 1,200 a season. So, the production's still there, even though he's been through, I'm just gonna throw a number out, like 12 quarterbacks in his 5 years here in DC or whatever it is. It could be more. But like I said, if you had that stability of coaches, coordinator, and just a good or an elite NFL quarterback, he'd be in that top 10 ranking instead of sitting at 15. Nobody else from the Commanders made the list, and kind of rightfully so. We just haven't been that good. But kind of is what it is, right? So, last position ranking that I kind of saw, and it's not really current. I guess it can be current. Some of these guys, one, two. I guess there's maybe two or three guys that are current on here. But it's kind of some discussion, right? It's the top 10. So this was put out by FanDuel. Not sure what they use to rank these guys. Chime in. Love to hear you. See if you can't see the stat, which is kind of difficult. I get it, but keep track in your head as we go down. Top 10 returners of all time. So we kind of know that Devin Hester's number one, right? Just made a Hall of Fame this year. He's going to be inducted here in August in Canton. Rightfully so. Pretty badass when it comes to returns. Kick returns, punt returns. Number two, and this is what stirred up the media in DC, along with myself, they put him under an Eagles logo. Okay? Let me rephrase that. They put him in under an Eagles logo. Brian Mitchell, number two. I'm sorry, but Brian Mitchell played the majority of his career, racked up all of his yards and all of his stats, playing for the Washington Redskins. Burgundy and gold. Not sure why they put him as an Eagle. Maybe that's just because of where he ended his career. I don't know. Like I said, they flipped the football card over, looked at it. Brian Mitchell. Oh, last team, Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know. But Brian Mitchell should be a burgundy and gold, number two. I'll take the first two right there, right? This is where it kind of gets kind of weird for me, personally. I'm old school, but chime in. Let's talk about it, right? Number three, Josh Cribbs. I had to be like, Don't know. Okay. Especially when I read the next 4 or 5. Number 4, Dante Hall. Remember that guy? Pretty prolific with the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 5, Eric Metcalf from the Browns. Kind of funny that 2 Browns make the list, especially in the top 5. But, Metcalf was pretty good in his own right back in the day. Number 6, we get the blue star from Dallas, right? Prime time, Deion Sanders. Number 6 on the list, out of top 10. I'll buy that. I'll buy Hall, Metcalf, and Sanders. Maybe even in that order. Maybe mix them up. Cribbs, ain't number 3. Ain't even in top 5. No way. No how. Number 7, Cordarrelle Patterson. Makes me shake my head again, right? Because especially when I give these last 2 out of 3, you're going to be like, how did Cribbs and Patterson make this list? Number 8, Desmond Howard from the Green Bay Packers, who also played for the Washington Redskins for 2 years. One of those splash signings that Snyder had. Actually, we drafted him, so yeah, whatever. Number 9, Darren Sproles. Eagles. It's probably where he's mostly known for, but he played for a couple teams as well. And then number 10, Allen Rossum from the Falcons. Never even heard of that dude. But, there's a lot of guys that are good punt return guys and punt return, kick return guys not on this list. And then there's 3 or 4 that are like, what? I have to go Gale Sayers, Only Videos, and Oli Matson. Devin Hester in primetime. Yep. Yeah, I don't see how Patterson's on there. Don't see how Cribbs is on there. Don't see how Rossum's on there. So there's 3 guys I would kick out of the all-time list of returners. But, it kind of is what it is. All right. We went a little long tonight because we had so much to talk about. But we got one more topic to do. And we kind of talked about it last episode 3 weeks ago. But an article came out in the Washington Post. So, you know what? That kind of put some validity to the news that I broke last episode 3 weeks ago about Washington lobbying to have the NFL draft in 2027. So basically, the NFL draft is now becoming a highly sought after event in the NFL, much to the competitive bidding that like Super Bowls and other, you know, there's not a whole lot of big events in the NFL other than the Super Bowl. But the draft is that opportunity for cities that will never have the Super Bowl because they like warm cities or dome cities to be in the Super Bowl rotation. That it basically gives them an opportunity, to put their city on display, their franchise, get that money from the tourism, the fans, and stuff like that. And I said this wholeheartedly 3 weeks ago, and I will say it again, that if they are given the 2027 NFL draft, you will see Steve Lockman on the wall in DC watching the draft with my Commanders jersey on. So let's talk about why this may work in DC. So, as they call it, Project Breeze, for whatever reason, don't even know why. DC's bid to host the 2027 NFL draft. So, they talked about in the article the process that they had to go through because, as you know, the majority of land and property in DC proper is federal government, right? So, there's a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of hurdles and jumps and stuff like that to go through to make this work. So there was a correspondence that was required through the Freedom of Information Act, as we all know, from the National Park Service, who basically owns all that land at the mall and the monuments and all that stuff. And they have internally referred to it as Project Breeze. Don't know how they came up for it or whatever. So basically, representatives from Events DC, which is the ones that basically do all the big events in DC, holidays, memorials, parades, the Marine Corps Marathon, like you name it, all that stuff basically run through Events DC, right? Um, Basically, it's the sports authority for the district and the National Park Service, which administers the National Mall and the monuments. We're in discussions with the NFL executives for months about holding the 3-day event in the district. Then the question becomes, well, where would you do it, right? So executives to the mayor, federal representatives, as well as the Park Service, confirmed that DC did, in fact, put in a bid for a big NFL tentpole event in 2027. And ideally, the NFL would like to hold that event on the National Mall, which I alluded to in our last episode. I was like, hey, that would be amazing. Put that thing up on the mall, backdrop of the Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial, the all the other memorials. You can't really see the White House from there, but whatever. As well as Capitol Hill. It would be amazing. Great backdrop. Basically, the NPS, National Park Service, gave their approval so far, temporarily, to do that. But it also kind of gave some limitations, if you will, that they're looking at different areas, so they kind of outline the street diagrams from here to here to here of where they could do it. The bid's very important to the district. They're trying to put forth that winning bid proposal for 27. They've already awarded the draft to 25 and 26, but 27 is the first one that's already open. One of the things that kind of throws a monkey wrench into it is a lot of times the federal government and NPS don't approve permits more than a year out for a certain event. The NFL is kind of a stickler that they want to have this thing done, and authorized before then. So they might get a waiver, might get it done beforehand, or it might just get that conditional approval. Hey, look, when the year comes, we're going to sign it. You guys can essentially say, you have it. I know that there is also some discussion on parking, alcohol, merchandising, logos, because merchant sales are prohibited on the mall. Didn't know this. Logos of draft sponsors would have to be no larger than basically a third of the size of the NFL draft logo. Alcohol, while generally prohibited on the mall, could be allowed under a temporary designation by the Park Service. Concession rules, stuff like that, because they're kind of picky about what happens, right? Green Bay is going to host the 2025 draft. Pittsburgh is doing 26. So it is the desire of DC government officials and the NFL at this point in time to have DC be in 2027. barring, the agency and all the permitting process and applications for special events goes through and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. Denver and Charlotte are strong hosts as well to be future draft site cities. So I'm not sure if one of them might sneak in and get 27. But it kind of seems like DC is the front runner to get 27 at this point. I haven't really heard a whole lot out of Denver and Charlotte, so to speak. But then again, unless you're kind of like in the cities and in the insider networks, you don't know that from another fan base perspective as well, unless it hits the national media, right? So it's definitely something that will be interesting to watch as we go forward. But it's definitely promising, definitely, optimistic. Would love to see it. I think you'd easily be able to get 1 million fans on the mall for the draft. They had something like 775,000 fans in Detroit this year for that draft. Detroit, let that ring in. Detroit, 770,000 people went to Detroit for the draft. If they can do almost 800,000 people in Detroit for the draft, there's no reason why they can't do 1 million in DC. Wholeheartedly, especially, let's be honest, as much as we love it and we would love to have a city that is predominantly one team fan base, DC is probably, next to New York, DC is probably one of the biggest areas that is so diversified in its fan base because the fan base is so transient, right? So many people come and go because of work, because of visiting, because of whatever. There aren't that many people planted around long term in DC. So you get so many fans. And I think that in return is where you would get your 1 million fans on the mall for the DC, because you're not pushing just, a 500,000 like Detroit Lion fans or Kansas City fans or whatever. Like, you're going to have so many NFL fans that just want to be part of that NFL experience of an NFL draft in our nation's capital, me being one. So I say, bring it, let them approve it, and let's have at it. So, as always, over the next 3 weeks, we'll keep watching our social media tabs, see what's happening with our team, see what's going on with our team and insiders, our national insiders, see what happens. We'll be getting ready for training camp, fired up here. And actually, our next episode will be right as training camp starts that week. Our next episode is going to be on Tuesday, July 30th, at 8:30 p.m. And like I said, training camp starts that week. The first week of public training camp days is actually that Friday and Saturday, the 1st and the 2nd. We'll also be joining them 215 boys on Wednesday night, July 24th at 9:30, as you see there at the bottom of your screen, as we talk OTAs and Commanders and Cowboys Outlook under our dubbed title, The Keep Your Enemies Close. We're going to be talking about each other's teams, how we think we're going to do, how we're looking, going into training camp. Talk some trash to each other, as we always do on each side of the ball, and across our NFC East. So, we got a lot to look forward to. Training camp coming up. Talk about who's going to be coming in, making their time to shine to make the 53-man roster, and kind of where we go from there. There's always news happening with our beloved team almost every day in some capacity, whether it's ongoing drama, whether it's something new, something old, on the field, off the field. We got you covered. Feel free, be a friend, tell a friend, like, subscribe, follow Commanders Gridiron, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, as well as Out of the Box Sports Network. Give us that like, give us that follow, give us a subscribe. Thank you all for checking in tonight. Thank you all for watching, listening, or even if you go back later on and watch the show if you weren't able to watch it tonight. Love to have you. Feel free to comment anytime throughout the show on this episode or future episodes. We love that engagement, love that conversation as we talk about our beloved Washington Commanders. So remember, July 30th, 8:30 p.m., our next episode. And until then, have a good night.